Hello everybody, and welcome to the final in our three-part series leading up to the August Democratic primary. Today we are joined by Congresswoman Carolyn Maloney and Congressman Jerry Nadler. We're going to spend, yes, please clap. We're obviously super excited to have them both here with us, and we're going to talk about a series of issues facing the nation overall. We're going to focus on some senior-related issues, and we're just going to have a conversation for 30 to 40 minutes per candidate. So we're going to start with Congresswoman Maloney, and then we're going to be joined by Congressman Nadler. And I am going to begin by recognizing the Congresswoman for a 2-minute opening.
Thank you so much, and thank you for hosting us and inviting me and Jerry here to the Inspire Carnegie Hill. I just want to introduce myself. My name is Carolyn Maloney. For those of you who don't know me, I am a mother, an educator, and your Congresswoman now, representing you. And my husband and I raised 2 daughters just a few blocks from here. And my office is about a block and a half, so if you have any problems, you can come by our office and we can try to help you. My career has been a series of firsts. I was the first woman to represent our neighborhood on the city council, the first woman to represent our neighborhood in Congress, and I have the distinction of being the first woman in the city council to give birth while in office. Many men gave birth, but I was the first. And that shows that usually I was like the only woman in the room. Now the city council is half women, so we are making progress. And I am the first woman to chair the Joint Economic Committee and the first woman to chair the Oversight Committee, which I chair right now, and one of 18 women in history that has had the honor of chairing a committee. One of my first jobs is that I taught English in East Harlem. When the program lost its money, I went to Albany to help get it back. And it changed my life because I could see the power of government to help people. And so I switched and went to work in Albany. And then I became pregnant. And I'll never forget, I went to my boss and asked for leave, that I was going to have a child. And he said, well, you just leave. We don't have any leave policies. And I said, I don't want to leave. And he said, well, it's never happened before. You've got to leave. And I fought for my job. I fought for it so hard, and I kept my job. But when I went to Congress, when I went to Congress and the city council, work-family balance and daycare and leave were a big part of it. When I first put in my bills for paid leave for the birth of a child and family and medical leave, people laughed at it. Why are you doing that? Well, I finally passed it. First for all federal employees, which is under the jurisdiction of my committee, and then for everybody else in the Build Back Better bill. But that failed in the Senate, so there's more work to do. And I was the first person in history to put in a gay marriage bill in the city council. And at the time, it was so controversial. It was so controversial they refused to print it. So I had to fight to get it printed. I had to say, they said it was unconstitutional. I said, nothing's unconstitutional until you go to the Supreme Court. Well, I finally got it printed, and now it's the law of the land. And I fought for family leave in one. I fought for the 2nd Avenue subway. We have the only subway that's been built since I've been in Congress, and it has helped the quality of life and built jobs. I'm proud of having built the 2nd Avenue subway, and we just got funding to go all the way up to 125th Street. And I took on the big banks with the credit card Bill of Rights and got them to knock out unfair, deceptive practices. And the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau says that this bill alone saves you, the consumer, over $16 billion a year. So since the year that I passed it, which was 2009, it's been over $200 billion that have been kept in consumers' pockets and not paid in big fines to banks. And so I took on family medical leave in one, took on the 2nd Avenue subway in one, I took on the big banks in one, and I'm still fighting. Now, one thing that I've learned since I've been in office is that change does not come easily, but it will come if you never give up. And I didn't give up on the 9/11 responders, and now they have health care for life. I didn't give up on the big banks and fighting them, and now you have $16 billion in your pocket instead of going in fees. I didn't give up on the Second Avenue subway. I didn't give up on any of these things, and I helped make them become a reality in your lives. And right now, I'm still fighting as a member of Congress. We had 3 terrible Supreme Court decisions that have come out.
We're going to get to that.
Okay, but the first hearing on the whole Roe problem was the one that I held in my committee, and I will share with you that I announced for Congress on the day of the Casey decision versus Planned Parenthood, which put restrictions on Roe. I was there with Bella Abzug, Geraldine Ferrara. They were fighting, this is terrible. And I just went out and announced for Congress. And I ran against a 14-year incumbent Republican who outspent me 4-1, Bill Green. I didn't expect to win, but I won and went to Congress, and I'm still fighting there for a woman's right to choose. And we need women who have the energy, commitment, and drive and focus to make this a top priority, to overturn this, change this, and turn it back. The last bill that we voted for in Congress before we left to come home was the Women's Health Protection Act and Ensuring Access to Abortion Act. So we are fighting back, and we are going to continue fighting back. Is my time up, or can I keep talking?
I believe you're not going to have anything left for a closing if you
Okay.
keep going. So,
all right.
So instead of beginning with the question I had right here, I actually want to continue on the subject that you just brought up, which was the overturning of Roe versus Wade. How do you believe the Biden administration's response to what has happened has been, and what do you think they should be doing differently? Because the public is largely dissatisfied with the action they're seeing, and of course, you can pass a bill in the House, but it's not going to make it through the Senate. So what could the administration be doing better?
Well, Biden has called for an exception to the terrible filibuster, which I think should be abolished. So we need 2 more votes, and if we abolish the filibuster, we need to elect 2 more senators. If we have the filibuster, we have to elect 11 more senators. He has come out with a number of executive orders on the ability to travel, to get an abortion. As you understand, abortion is legal in New York and California, but 16 states have already moved to ban it. And over 33 million American women who are childbearing age live in states that do not have access to abortion. And the 16 states are counting. It's really very tragic. I want to compliment our governor, Governor Hochul, for coming out with a whole types of programs. We are going to be a sanctuary city for people to come for abortions. She even has a program that would help fund this going forward. So Biden has come out calling for the travel with an executive order, allowing the travel, because they'll try to cut off the travel. And then many of you know that Thomas came out in his decision and said that on the right to privacy, we should now be going after birth control. We should be going after gay marriage and other areas. So Biden has come out with executive orders to protect those particular areas. And if you don't have the votes, that's a problem. So ultimately, what we have to do is what I did back in 1992. When they were rolling back Roe back then, I announced for Congress and took a Republican out. We need people to run against these people that are against choice and against a woman's right to make decisions over her own body. It's outrageous when you think about it, and extremely discriminatory to tell you what to do about your health care and your own body and have put restrictions on your own body. I would say there's no democracy unless we can make decisions about our own bodies. And then the other Supreme Court decision on guns, they deregulate the guns. So here they are moving to regulate a woman's body and to deregulate the guns. So it's all in the wrong direction. We have to go out and win this election. And I think the way we win it is talking about the good things that President Biden has done and the good things that Democrats have done. I don't want to be critical of Democrats. I want people to vote for Democrats. And we have done a number of good things, particularly during COVID. We had billions of dollars who came to our city for free vaccines, free treatment, helping our hospitals. We were the epicenter of the epicenter. We needed funding to keep our subways going. Billions rolled into New York under the American Rescue Plan, and then we passed the first infrastructure plan in, I don't know how many years, to help with the infrastructure. But I didn't need an infrastructure plan to build the 2nd Avenue subway. I built it and got the federal money myself. I got the federal money for the 63rd Street connector going into Queens. I got the money, $1 billion, to modernize the L train connecting Manhattan and Brooklyn, and got over $8 billion working with others to have the East Side access connecting into Grand Central and Penn Central with a whole modernization and upgrade. How many of you have ridden on the 2nd Avenue subway? Isn't it beautiful and quiet? You know, when I get depressed, I go ride the 2nd Avenue subway. and I see how beautiful it is. And I get more letters from people. It changed my life, made my life better. And that's why I love my job so much. You can really help people. And there's nothing more exciting than helping people and being able to do things that makes their lives better, such as the 2nd Avenue subway. And I'd say also the East Side Esplanade. Remember what a wreck that used to be? Now it's beautiful. If you ever get depressed on a Sunday or a Saturday, go out and walk on it. It's really beautiful. We put billions into it to modernize it, beautify it, and make it livable.
I'm about to make everyone depressed again.
What?
So I'm really sorry, but I have another question about the Supreme Court.
Okay.
So you brought up the issue of guns, so we don't have to cover that, but we didn't talk about West Virginia versus the EPA. The EPA's ability to regulate greenhouse gas emissions has largely been gutted. What are regulations that you support that we can get through Congress to get us back on track towards our climate goals?
Well, one of the problems, I used to represent Queens, and we had a huge polluting system over there. And within 1 or 2 miles, there were roughly 28 peaker plants polluting the air. And this resulted in young people having asthma. It's called Asthma Alley. So I had a huge win over there. We protested, and we wrote the governor, and we worked with RFPs, and they now have an RFP that they're going to close Big Alice down and make it hydro clean energy. But I also put a bill in. The other area where we have peaker plants in Manhattan is around Stuyvesant Town, and they were trying to put more polluting power plants there. And when you looked at it, the way they permit it, it's permitted on the state level. And the way they permit it is looking at one peaker plant and seeing if it polluted the area. But they didn't look at the cumulative. So I put in a bill that you had to look at the cumulative effect before you could get another peaker plant. So that closed down peaker plants going into McQueen's area of my district and into Stuyvesant Town too, and I'm proud of that. And I wrote a bill that has gotten out of committee that would make that the law of the land. So I'm proud of that. That is one thing that you can do. But I do think that the governor's plan that she's come out with incentives to make buildings green and having incentives to give buildings to be green. I don't know whether this is a green building or not, but if it is, you should go into her plan and become a green building. That's another thing we can do. But when they said in that Supreme Court decision that you should turn back to Congress to make these decisions over the environment, these are scientific decisions. And Congress is so busy with so many other areas that we're working in. And I find that a disastrous decision that hurts our efforts to combat climate change. And it's got to change. And one of the ways to change it is to elect enough women and men that are pro-choice, pro-environment, pro-gun safety to the United States Congress and to the Senate to keep our majority in the House and to grow our majority in the Senate. That is the best way to make change. I just want to give one example on choice. When I went to Congress, choice was such a controversial issue My first meeting of the Women's Caucus, I said I was here to fight for choice. They said it's not one of our issues, it's too controversial. I talked them into having it as one of our issues. But the entire time I was in Congress, they would chip away at choice. And I used to keep a scorecard on choice. And when I got to over 300 anti-choice votes that had gotten through the House, not the Senate or the President, I just stopped keeping it. And they just had the votes to chip away at Roe v. Wade. Now they're coming at it with a bulldozer. But for the first time, we were able to pass and codify Roe v. Wade because we elected over 100 women to Congress and like-minded men, and we had the votes to pass it. So we were able to pass it. So the best way to really turn this tide is to elect, hold on to our Democratic majority in the House and build it in the Senate, and give the leader Schumer the strength and the numbers that he needs.
Thank you. And on the work of Congress, as you were saying, the fact that this is being kicked back to Congress in terms of climate regulations, it's very alarming that we're not seeing this functionality among our branches of government. And one area that America's been severely focused on is the January 6th insurrection. And right now, we've gone through 2 impeachments that both resulted in acquittals. Now we have the January 6th committee that's providing a lot of public evidence about the alleged crimes that happened. Do you believe that the committee should make a criminal referral to the Justice Department, and are you happy so far with the Justice Department's response to the events on January 6th?
Well, I think it's just startling how guilty he is. He led an insurrection of our country. I just want to share that I live next door to the Pakistani embassy, and I've always tried to be a good neighbor. And one ambassador said to me, "Let me tell you what I most respect about your country." And I guessed our freedom, our education, our health care. It was the peaceful transfer of power. So few countries have it. We've always had it. We've always cherished it, and we almost lost it on January 6th. And I was there when it all happened. It was just unbelievable what happened. Now, all of this evidence is incredibly damning, but one that struck out in my mind was the Department of Justice. He had all these people temporary, so they weren't really in charge. But it was, and I looked at the documents because we have the oversight of them, and we got the documents that we gave to the January 6th committee. And these documents were in real time. You never hardly get documents on presidents. They conceal it or hold them. We got the documents on January 6th and the communication between President Trump and the Department of Justice. And these men were taking notes in real time. And we have those notes. And that's what the January 6th committee was talking about, and I had a hearing on it also. But he called them and he said, "Come out and say that the election was stolen." And they said, "No, Mr. President, we can't. There's no evidence." And he said, "I don't care. Just say it. Just say it. Or I'm going to, fire you or whatever." But it was unbelievable. It was written as such. I think that he should have been impeached. I think that he should be indicted. I think that there should be a reference to the Justice Department to pursue him as a criminal. But I don't have the power to do that. That's up to the January 6th committee. That's their decision to make. I hope they make it. I think that this coming Thursday is going to be the last night of their hearings. And I like it because it's going to be at nighttime so that you can watch it.
8 p.m. Eastern.
8 p.m. We should all watch it and see where it stands. I think that they've done an incredible job of making the case. There's absolutely the proof is just so salient that he's guilty.
On that subject, what can we be doing right now to protect the 2024 elections? Because we're seeing a really troubling trend among election officials in Republican-led areas, people being appointed who don't necessarily believe in democracy as we've currently understood it. And we also have the concern about whether or not the Supreme Court is going to vest state legislatures with power to essentially throw out people's votes and select whoever they want for the electors, the Electoral College. So what can we do to make sure that we actually have a democratic election in 2024 where the will of the people is respected and the person they elect becomes the president?
Well, we've done a number of things that help, and that's early voting, and that's the voting machines that have a paper trail, which is important, with oversight of it. I had a hearing on the Arizona election where everybody said that it was, the Republicans were claiming it was an illegal, stolen election. And we brought in the election officials who were Republican, and they testified that it was an honest, fair, good election. But then, the minute they left, I thought, this is great. Now the Republicans will agree that it was a fair election. And they stood up there, Biggs and others, saying it was a stolen election. They just are trying to put the big lie. The big lie is really Trump's attempt to steal the election. That's the big lie. But it's a big problem, and it's something that we all have to work on. Nothing is more important than our democracy and preserving it, and putting systems in place to protect it. And a lot of it's dependent on good people. And a lot of the people that have become whistleblowers, believe it or not, are Republicans. And they're Republicans, they're real Republicans, but they can't stand these lie that the election was stolen. They're coming forward and saying it wasn't, and giving the proof that it wasn't. Anyway.
I think part of the issue is also that a lot of Americans are losing faith in their institutions. When we look at the approval ratings for Congress right now, only 7% of people express a high degree of trust in Congress. That means 93% of people don't have a high degree of trust in Congress. What can we do to restore that trust between people and their representatives?
Keep working hard, keep having forums like this, and getting the message out. We're so fortunate to have a democracy. Really, most of the world doesn't. And we need to fight very hard to preserve it and to elect good people to office.
Thank you. Moving on to some healthcare related issues. A question, we took a number of questions from the audience here, submitted in advance around aging, and something that came up a lot was access to pain relief and comfort related medications for people, particularly over 80. Do you have any ideas about how we can expand access to that kind of quality of life care for people that are having trouble?
If you're having trouble, go to your doctor. There are a lot of ways that they can make you feel better, but you have to be careful not to get addicted. Yeah. And we know that opioids are terribly addictive, and stay away from them. And you can just work with a doctor. Both mental health and physical health, both are important, and really the drugs are out there. They're there to kill you, really. We've had 107,000 overdoses from opioids this year alone. And one of the reasons is that the doctors are, the manufacturers got the FDA to say it was non-addictive when it was terribly addictive, and they knew it. It's a scandal. I had hearings on it. And McKinsey, we had hearings on McKinsey. I just put in a bill where they had people working for the FDA and the drug manufacturers at the same time and didn't tell them, the same person. So they would go to the FDA and urge them to approve these opioids and say they weren't addictive. It's criminal. It's criminal. They paid a big fine, but really I think they should be in jail. They killed people with their actions. And so we have to fight all of this activity. But if you feel like you have pain and you need help, go to a doctor, but it should be supervised by a doctor.
And in addition, another question that we received were a number of people that were concerned about their grandchildren's safety who are members of the LGBT community, specifically trans kids. We've seen a number of bills across the country targeting transgender youth. And I was wondering your thoughts on what kind of federal response we should have to protect trans youth, specifically when it comes to housing, healthcare, and their personal safety at school.
Well, I think one of the movements that are very disturbing to me is the banning of books. And that they now say, don't say gay and all of this, and they don't talk about it and all this, that, and the other. And I am working on a bill that is similar to a bill that I authored to combat anti-Semitism when there was a rising tide here, even in our own neighborhood. As a former teacher, I see many answers as education. So I passed a bill called the Never Again Holocaust Education Plan. And it started a program in the Holocaust Museum in Washington, where they have lesson plans for every age group that are age appropriate. And you can write in and get a lesson plan. It has $10 million for innovative lesson plans. Well, I put a similar bill in for LGBTQ in response to the Don't Say Gay. And this would have the same developed lesson plans, educational materials, and this type of thing that teachers and students can access to learn more about the fights, like the Stonewall fight, and like the fights for equality of treatment in housing and employment, and learn it and make it available instead of banning it.
Thank you. And returning to healthcare, we're seeing the rise of monkeypox, specifically here in New York City. We've kind of become the epicenter of the issue. And a lot of people are frustrated because they're seeing echoes of the HIV/AIDS crisis of the 80s, where the most vulnerable communities, which primarily right now appears to be gay men, are having a tough time accessing the care that they need because largely due to the fact that the federal government isn't getting us vaccines fast enough. And in addition to that, we're seeing an equity problem where people that are upper middle class, white, they're having an easier time accessing the vaccines. So I know I personally was vaccinated in Harlem, and in the line, there wasn't a single black person. And I found that really alarming because we saw a similar problem with the COVID-19 vaccine rollout where whiter and wealthier people were having an easier time accessing this even when it was in their own communities. So do you have any ideas about how we can increase the equity and reach the communities who need to be reached and ensure that we're prioritizing properly?
Well, let me ask you a question. When you went to Harlem to get your vaccination, where was it that you went?
It was 145th Street. I don't remember the name of the location.
Okay, but it was in an African-American community, right?
Yes, it was.
So I'm sure that they gave the reason it was in an African-American community is to reach African-Americans. And so they would, they have to come and get it. A lot of people don't.
Well, the issue was that the appointments were not made from the community. The appointments were largely accessed from people who had closer relationships with their public health officials and who accessed the information to get the appointment. And a lot of that was released online in some very specific channels. So it doesn't appear there was a lot of outreach to other communities.
Well, we'll have to work on the outreach. I think the fact that it was on 145th Street shows that they're trying to outreach to the African-American community. If they wanted to access this community, they'd be on 92nd Street.
You're assigned your location when you sign up for the vaccine. They just assign you a location and you go to it. So
Okay.
It's not that people can walk up and request it. It all had to be done on the internet, and I think that's part of it. Yeah.
Well, we just wrote a letter because the vaccines are overseas, and why aren't we getting them? So we just wrote a letter, my office did, on the monkey vax to get more. The main thing to do is to get access to all the vaccines and then once we get the vaccines, it's sometimes hard to get the people to take the vaccine, as you know. And I represented 2 areas in my Queens area of my district that were among the most underserved. And in one, they had to walk 2 miles before you could get a vaccine. So I had a mobile health unit come in, and it's there. I hope to make it permanent. I was going to make it permanent, but I'm no longer representing that area. And it was providing just vaccines. And I did the same thing at Queensbridge, the largest public housing development. It is the only public housing development in the state that has an on-site permanent healthcare center, primarily treating COVID, providing vaccines and testing. As far as that is concerned, when there's a problem, I've worked very hard to get the vaccines, not only with the vans that go in for the day, but I created 2 permanent vaccine centers in the district that I represent. And they will be providing the monkey vax too.
Thank you. I'm not sure how we're doing on time, and I believe Evan held up a sign for me that I couldn't read, so I'm really sorry. But I think we have time for 1 or 2 more questions. So a question that we had, is that right, Evan? Yeah. Wonderful. So we have 1 or 2 more questions from the community. 1, how would you ensure that all Americans, including those employed by the federal government, have access to paid family leave?
In the government?
That's what it says.
Okay.
Including those employed by the federal government have access to paid family leave.
Well, I actually passed a bill to provide paid family leave for all federal employees. So through your offices, you should be able to apply for it. I introduced it when I first went to Congress. It took me years to pass it, but it finally passed. I'm very proud of it. And I think it's necessary. I think we saw during COVID that you need leave, you need daycare, you need support for families. And I'm very proud of having authored it. And I worked on another bill that provided it for everyone. And that was in Build Back Better. But we got it through the House, but we didn't get it through the Senate. So we're gonna have to keep working on that.
And 1 more about the grandkids. A lot of folks have expressed fear for their grandkids in schools because of the rash of shootings. And residents were wondering what you think we can do to increase the safety of these children in schools, and also people who live in long-term care facilities like this, where there isn't necessarily an easy way to exit the situation.
Well, if guns made us safer, we would be the safest country on earth, and we're the most dangerous. And we need to pass gun safety laws. We had 1 bill that moved forward, but it's not enough. And next week when we go back, we're going to be voting on a ban on assault weapons, which is the weapon of choice in most of these mass shootings. I am having a hearing in 2 weeks on gun manufacturers, on the role that they have played in making guns accessible to the public. We have to pass gun safety laws, background checks, closing the gun show loophole. I have a bill in that you should have liability on guns. Let me tell you, I got death threats after it from the gun industry. But we have liability required on cars. Guns are far more dangerous. We should have liability insurance on guns. And we have the technology for guns that can only respond to your hand. We must make that technology available and use it and require it. There are steps we can take to make our people safer, and we need the political will to do it. Democrats have it. We keep passing gun safety bills and they fail in the Senate. We cannot let our children down. We have to pass this. And these assault weapons, they have no place in our schools, which in Buffalo and in Uvalde, Texas, they had an AR-15 assault weapon. They should be banned. We banned them in '94, and the amount of gun deaths went down. It sunsetted after 10 years. We have to reinitiate that ban on guns. And as President Biden has said, he will not give up until we ban assault weapons.
Thank you so much. And getting the applause before you even get to make your closing. So I'd like to recognize you for a 2-minute closing.
Well, what can I say? It's been the honor of my life to represent you and to represent this neighborhood. In fact, I live in the neighborhood. I have a record of accomplishment. I have been rated first, second, or third most effective member of Congress, and Republicans or Democrats from GovTrack and Committee on Effective Congress. I've authored and passed over 70 bills, 17 of which have been signed into law in presidential bill signings. And most recently, I passed a bill called the reform of the Postal Service. I think we all learned during COVID how important the Postal Service was to get our medications, to get our work. And it was slated to run out of money by 2025. And the Republicans wanted to privatize it. I made it a top priority. I got their finances in order and made other modernization to keep them on track for generations to come. I'm very proud of my bill. It had a presidential bill signing recently with President Biden, and it was very exciting to make that happen. And right now, I'm more determined than ever to fight for Roe v. Wade, to fight for sensible gun safety, and for the Green New Deal and climate change, and to protect our people from the disastrous decisions of this Supreme Court. But we have a lot to be thankful for. We have a great country, and we need to send to Congress women who understand the issues, who will go have the energy and drive to make it a top priority to fight for the Equal Rights Amendment, which has always been a dream of mine. And I would say they couldn't do what they did if we had the Equal Rights Amendment, because the Equal Rights Amendment would say you can't discriminate against women. I can't think of anything more discriminatory than telling women what to do with their bodies. They're not telling men what to do. They're not limiting what they can do with their bodies, but they're literally telling us what our health care should be, including reproductive health. And I'm sure you've seen the scandals of a little girl who was raped. And some of these states don't even have an exemption for rape or incest. It's barbaric. All of this needs to change. I would very much, I'm asking for your support. It's a very difficult election because it's August 23rd, and not a lot of people are going to be around August 23rd, so get an absentee ballot. And I think it's important that you get out and vote, and I'm asking for your support. I won't let you down. I have a record to run on. I'm proud of having built the 2nd Avenue subway, the East Side Esplanade, and to have brought many good benefits, over $10 billion in my district alone, in infrastructure projects. In addition to passing a bill that saves you, the consumer, over $16 billion a year. So what can I say? Thank you for this opportunity to be with you. Thank you for inviting us, and thank you for really welcoming me into your home. Thank you.